Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where love, danger, and destiny collide in ways that take your breath away. The night was heavy with luxury and silence. La Serrata, the city's most elite Italian restaurant, shimmered like a hidden jewel under the velvet sky. Golden chandeliers hung above each table, their soft light dancing across crystal glasses and polished cutlery. The air smelled of expensive wine, roses, and secrets, the kind that only the rich and ruthless could afford to keep. Among the servers weaving gracefully through the tables was Lila Maren, a woman of quiet elegance and mysterious calm. Her uniform was crisp, her step silent, her smile polite yet distant. She wasn't like the other waitresses who gossiped or flirted for tips. Lila carried an aura of poise, as though she belonged to another world entirely. But tonight her world was about to collide with darkness. At table 9 sat Adrian Moretti, the name that made even the city's bravest men lower their voices. A Mafia boss cloaked in sophistication, tailored black suit, sharp jawline, and eyes that could slice through lies. He dined rarely in public, and when he did, silence followed him like a shadow. No one dared to meet his gaze. No one except Lila, though even she wasn't sure why her eyes kept drifting toward him. He was magnetic in a way that was dangerous. Calm, composed, with a presence that could bend the air around him. She could feel the weight of his aura from across the room. But as she moved to refill his glass, her attention caught something strange. Two men, Adrian's own bodyguards, exchanged a glance that wasn't loyalty, a flick of the wrist. A subtle nod toward a man at the bar who didn't belong. Lila's instincts sharpened. She had grown up reading faces, learning when silence meant danger. And right now, the air was full of it. Her heart began to race, but her face remained serene. She continued her path, tray steady in her hands, her eyes darting between the bodyguards and the stranger. Under the white linen of table 9, a hand moved, too slowly, too deliberately, toward something metallic, a gun. Lila's breath caught. For a second, her mind screamed to run, but something deeper, something instinctive, told her to move closer instead. Adrian's life, for reasons she couldn't explain, suddenly mattered. She approached his table, her heels clicking softly against marble. The room blurred, voices fading into the background. She stopped beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stay quiet and don't move." Adrian's brow furrowed. No one ever spoke to him like that. His icy gaze met hers, searching, almost intrigued, but before he could respond, Lila's hand brushed his arm lightly, a silent command to trust her. Then it happened. A flash, a sound like thunder. Glass shattered. Gunfire ripped through the restaurant. The chandeliers trembled, sending sparks of crystal raining down. Guests screamed, ducking beneath tables. Lila didn't think. She acted. She lunged forward, knocking Adrian to the ground just as a bullet tore through the chair where his head had been seconds before. The scent of gunpowder filled the air. Her pulse thundered. Beneath the chaos, she felt his heartbeat, strong, unyielding, against her arm. For a man feared by all, he looked human for the first time. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in disbelief. Disbelief that a woman like her would throw herself into danger for him. They crawled behind the counter as another round of shots echoed. Lila's breathing was shaky, her hands trembling as she grabbed a broken bottle for defense. He reached over, his hand covering hers, firm, warm, commanding. "Who are you?" he whispered, voice low but powerful. "Just someone who didn't want to see blood tonight," she replied, meeting his eyes. Those deep, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. The silence between them felt louder than the gunfire. Within minutes his guards stormed in, returning fire until the shooters fled. The restaurant fell into chaos. Smoke, screams, sirens. But in that hidden corner, the world stood still. Adrian Moretti, the untouchable Mafia boss, sat on the floor beside a trembling waitress, and for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. He watched her, hair disheveled, a tiny cut on her cheek catching the golden light. There was something divine in her courage, something wild and unplanned. No one had ever touched him without permission. No one had ever saved him. As his men secured the area, Adrian's eyes never left her. "You just changed everything," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Lila didn't reply. She simply nodded, rose quietly, and walked away through the broken glass and spilled wine, leaving behind a trail of mystery that would haunt him long after the sirens faded. That night, in the ruins of La Serrata, the legend of Adrian Moretti met the grace of a woman who had no reason to save him, and yet did. And somewhere in the shadows of that shattered restaurant, fate smiled. knowing that this was only the beginning of danger, of devotion, and of a love that neither of them had ever expected. The sound of breaking glass hung in the air like a scream frozen in time. Smoke curled from the shattered chandeliers, and wine spilled across the marble floor like blood. The once luxurious La Serrata was now a war zone of fear and confusion. But beneath the storm, two souls moved as one. Lila's pulse thundered in her ears as she dragged Adrian Moretti toward the shelter of the counter. Every instinct told her she shouldn't be here, that she was an ordinary woman caught in extraordinary danger. But there was something about his presence, the gravity of who he was, that made fear feel distant. Adrian's hand brushed hers, strong and unyielding, as she pulled him down. The warmth of his skin sent a strange tremor through her, not of terror, but of connection. He, the most powerful man in the city, was now hidden behind a counter beside a trembling waitress who smelled faintly of lavender and courage. Bullets whizzed past, slicing through the air. Adrian peered over the counter, calculating every sound, every movement. His mind, sharp and ruthless, was trained for moments like these, but tonight it was clouded by something new. Her bravery, her defiance. The way her eyes didn't look at him with fear, but with fierce determination. "You shouldn't have done that," he murmured, his voice low, dangerous, yet strangely tender. "And let you die in my restaurant," she whispered back, her lips trembling. That wasn't an option. Her words struck something inside him. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his men, not his enemies, not even the women who had once tried to love him. There was no hesitation, no greed in her tone, only truth. Another explosion shattered the front door. Adrian's men burst in, dark suits, guns drawn, shouting in Italian. The gunfire that followed echoed through the halls like thunder. Lila covered her ears, shutting her eyes as glass rained down again. She felt a sudden grip, Adrian's arm pulling her against him. His chest was firm, his heartbeat steady. In the midst of panic, his presence wrapped around her like armor. "Stay still," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "You're safe with me." She opened her eyes to find herself inches from his face, his breath warm, his gaze burning with intensity. For a moment, time stopped. His eyes weren't just dark, they were haunted. The kind of eyes that had seen too much blood and betrayal, yet still carried something fragile, something that yearned for peace. And in that instant, she understood beneath the layers of power and crime, Adrian Moretti was a man who had forgotten what it meant to be saved. When the gunfire ceased, silence fell heavy and thick. Smoke drifted across the room, and the faint sound of sirens began to wail in the distance. Adrian stood, offering his hand. His palm was large, rough, yet when she took it, his touch was surprisingly gentle. He pulled her to her feet as if she were made of porcelain. She expected him to walk away, to disappear into the night surrounded by his guards, but instead, he looked at her, truly looked at her. "What's your name?" "Lila," she said softly, brushing the dust off her uniform. "Lila," he repeated, tasting the name like a secret on his tongue. "You risked your life for a man you don't know." "Maybe," she said with a faint smile, "but I knew danger when I saw it, and I couldn't ignore it." Adrian's lips curved slightly, not into his usual cold smirk, but into something almost human. "You're either incredibly brave," he said, stepping closer, "or incredibly foolish." "Maybe a little of both," she whispered. Their eyes met, and in that single glance something unspoken bloomed. Around them, the chaos was still settling, men shouting, police sirens echoing outside, reporters gathering like vultures. But in that corner of shattered glass and dim light, there was only silence, the kind that binds two fates together without permission. He turned toward his men. "Get everyone out," he ordered, his voice steady once more. Then, to her surprise, he placed a hand on her arm. "Not her. She stays." Lila blinked. "Why?" Adrian's gaze softened, though his words carried command. "Because I owe her my life, and I don't like debts." She wanted to argue, to say she didn't need his gratitude. But there was something in his tone, something final. His world didn't understand kindness, it understood loyalty. And without realizing it, she had just earned his. As they stepped outside together, the night wind brushed through her hair. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Adrian ignored them all. He simply guided her to his car, shielding her with his coat as if she were someone precious. The black limousine door opened. He looked down at her, the waitress who had defied death without hesitation. "Get in," he said softly. "It's not safe for you anymore." And though every instinct told her to run, something inside whispered that safety had already left the equation. As the car door shut and the city lights blurred past, Lila glanced sideways. Adrian sat quietly beside her, his expression unreadable, his fingers drumming lightly against his knee. But when he turned, their eyes met again, and in that fleeting second, something shifted. It wasn't just gratitude, it was fascination, respect, and perhaps the faintest spark of something far more dangerous than bullets or betrayal: love. The sun had not yet risen when Lila woke to the sound of a car engine idling outside her apartment. She peered through the window curtains. A black Rolls-Royce, polished like liquid night, waited on the street. Two men in charcoal suits stood beside it, their posture sharp, their presence commanding. Her heart skipped. She didn't need to ask who had sent them. Adrian Moretti. For hours after the chaos at La Serrata, she hadn't been able to sleep. The image of his dark eyes, calm amid the bullets, haunted her. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the danger she had faced or the way her pulse still raced whenever she remembered the feel of his hand gripping hers. When the knock came, it wasn't loud. Just 3 slow, deliberate taps. "Miss Lila Maren?" "Yes, Mr. Moretti requests your presence." Her heart pounded in her chest. Requests wasn't the right word. Men like Adrian didn't request, they commanded. Yet, there was something respectful, almost protective in the man's tone. Within minutes, she found herself seated in the car, city lights flickering past like ghosts. The air smelled faintly of leather and power, and something about it made her feel both uneasy and strangely safe. The mansion loomed on a hill overlooking the city. Moretti Estate, a fortress of glass and stone. Its gates opened silently, revealing a long driveway lined with cypress trees that whispered secrets in the dawn breeze. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls adorned with abstract art that spoke of wealth beyond imagination. But amidst all the grandeur, it was him who commanded attention. Adrian stood near the tall windows, back turned, watching the sun rise over his empire. His black suit fit him like sin, sharp, perfect, and dangerous. When he finally turned, his gaze met hers, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. "Lila," he said, his voice low, smooth as aged whiskey. "You came." "I wasn't given much of a choice," she replied, her tone braver than she felt. A faint smile touched his lips, the kind that made people wonder if he was amused or about to destroy something. "You saved my life. The least I could do was invite you to breakfast." Her brows lifted. Breakfast? That was the last thing she expected from a Mafia boss. He gestured toward the dining table, set for 2 with crystal silver and porcelain that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Steam rose from freshly brewed coffee. The scent mingled with something rarer: quiet tension, curiosity, and a pull neither of them wanted to admit. She sat cautiously. He poured the coffee himself, an intimate gesture that didn't fit his ruthless reputation. "You saw something last night that not even my men noticed," he said. "How?" Lila hesitated. "I pay attention. It's part of my job." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with interest. "No, it's more than that. You read people. You see through silence." His words made her heart flutter. No one had ever noticed her like this before. Not the real her, not the quiet observer who caught every subtle shift of emotion. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I'd rather stay invisible. It's safer that way." He gave a slow, knowing smile. "Invisible women don't save men like me, Lila." The way he said her name, low, deliberate, sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to look away, but his presence filled the room, impossible to ignore. Then, with a tone that held no room for argument, he said, "You'll work for me now." Her eyes widened. "Work for you? I'm a waitress, not." "You're observant, fearless, and loyal to no one." "That's exactly what I need." He stood, walking toward her, the soft sound of his shoes echoing against the marble floor. When he reached her, he stopped inches away. The scent of his cologne, dark, smoky, intoxicating, surrounded her. "I don't trust easily," he murmured. "But last night, you made a choice without hesitation. You saw betrayal before I did. That means something in my world." Lila met his gaze, her heartbeat trembling between fear and fascination. "And if I refuse?" Adrian's lips curved, not into a threat, but into something far more dangerous, a promise. "Then I'll simply have to find another way to keep you safe. Because whether you like it or not, Lila, they'll come for you." She swallowed hard. Deep down, she knew he was right. By saving him, she had stepped into his world, and there was no way out. Silence fell between them, heavy yet charged. She should have felt terrified. Instead, she felt drawn to him, the contradiction he embodied, power and restraint, darkness and honor. Finally, he turned away, his voice softening just enough to sound almost human. Stay here for now. My people will arrange everything you need. Think of it as protection. She looked at him, confusion clouding her thoughts. Why are you doing this? He paused by the window, the golden light of morning touching his face. His answer came quietly, like a confession. Because when you told me to stay quiet and not move, it was the first time in years I listened to anyone. The words hit her like a heartbeat, slow, powerful, unforgettable. As the sun rose higher, Lila realized that whatever bound them now wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something that could burn them both if they let it. And standing there, with the most dangerous man in the city watching her with eyes that saw too much, she understood one thing clearly: the real danger had only just begun. Days turned into weeks inside the walls of the Moretti estate, a palace carved from marble and mystery. For Lila, it felt like living inside a dream she couldn't wake from. A dream lined with luxury, danger, and the presence of a man who defied everything she thought she understood about power. Adrian Moretti was unlike anyone she had ever known. His world moved in silence and precision, a constant rhythm of decisions that changed lives, or ended them. Yet, beneath the armor of a mafia boss was a man who carried loneliness like a second skin. At first, Lila tried to stay invisible, just as she had done at La Serrata. She worked quietly, assisting his secretary, reviewing documents, organizing meetings. Tasks that kept her close enough to see his world, but far enough to pretend she didn't belong to it. But the problem was, Adrian noticed everything. He noticed the way she bit her lip when she was thinking, the way she always tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, the way she avoided looking at him for too long. Perhaps because when she did, she couldn't look away. And slowly the lines between protection and something deeper began to blur. One night, Lila found herself in the library, a vast, quiet space filled with the scent of old books and cedarwood. Adrian entered, dressed not in his usual black suit but a dark shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing veins and tension and strength. His presence was magnetic, commanding, yet strangely gentle. "You're still awake," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, tracing her fingers over a leather-bound novel. "Your house doesn't really allow that." He chuckled, a rare sound, deep and quiet, like a storm laughing at itself. "My house?" he asked. "You make it sound like it has a soul." She turned to face him. "Maybe it does. Or maybe it just mirrors yours. Cold on the outside, but restless underneath." For a moment, neither spoke. His eyes, dark, unreadable, searched hers. Then he stepped closer, the space between them shrinking until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You're bold," he said. "Most people never dare to look me in the eye." "Maybe that's why they never really see you," she whispered. He froze. Something flickered behind his expression. Surprise, curiosity, maybe even longing. It was as if she had reached through all the walls he'd built and touched the man beneath. Over the next few days, things changed. Adrian began to include her in conversations that had nothing to do with business. Small talk that felt intimate simply because it was him. He'd ask her about her favorite books, her childhood, her dreams. And every time she answered, she saw something soften in him. A look that said he hadn't spoken like this to anyone in years. He'd often find excuses to be near her, lingering after meetings, walking her through the gardens, or sharing quiet dinners on the terrace, where the city lights shimmered below like fallen stars. One evening, as the golden sunset poured through the glass walls, Adrian stood beside her watching the horizon. "You know," he said, "before that night, I didn't believe anyone would ever risk their life for me. People fear me, Lila. They obey me, but they don't save me." She looked up at him, her voice gentle. "Maybe you just needed someone who saw the man, not the monster." He turned to her slowly. "And what do you see?" Her breath caught. "Both." The word lingered between them like a spark in still air. Then his hand brushed against hers. A touch so brief, yet so charged that it made her skin tremble. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. From that night, something wordless grew between them, a gravity neither could deny. Their conversations became longer, their silences heavier. One stormy evening, she entered his office to deliver a file. Thunder rolled outside, and the glow from the fireplace cast shadows that danced across his face. He looked up from his desk, eyes burning with the kind of wariness only power can create. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "And yet, you're glad I am," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. He rose slowly, his movements deliberate. When he reached her, he stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat of his breath. "You have no idea what you've done to my world," he murmured. "Then tell me," she breathed. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering, tracing her cheek as though memorizing the shape of something forbidden. His eyes softened, darkened. "You make me forget who I'm supposed to be." Her heart raced. The room seemed to dissolve, only the sound of rain, the firelight, and the space between their breaths. For a man who ruled through fear, he looked almost fragile. And for the woman who had once lived in silence, she had never felt so alive. He didn't kiss her, not yet. But when his hand slid down to her wrist, his thumb pressing gently against her pulse, the unspoken promise between them was louder than any confession. That night, when she lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, Lila realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. She wasn't afraid of Adrian Moretti anymore. She was afraid of what she was becoming because of him. And somewhere across the mansion, Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the rain, wondering why a single waitress with quiet eyes could make the most powerful man in the city feel utterly powerless. The mansion was quiet that night, too quiet. Rain whispered against the tall glass windows, and a strange stillness hung in the air, as though the house itself sensed the storm that was coming. Lila stood in the hallway, her reflection trembling in the candlelight. For weeks, she had lived between two worlds, the soft rhythm of her heart and the ruthless pulse of Adrian's empire. Somewhere in that space, she had found love. Not the gentle kind sung about in songs, but the kind born from chaos, danger, and truth. But peace in a Mafia world is only an illusion before the next betrayal. That evening, Adrian had been distant, quiet even for him. He sat in his office, staring at a single piece of paper with a fury that didn't show on his face but burned in his eyes. Lila entered cautiously. "You've been locked in here all day," she said softly. "Talk to me." He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "It was someone inside," he murmured. "Someone close. The same ones who tried to kill me at La Serrata. They've been waiting, and they're not done." Her breath caught. "Who?" He hesitated, and in that hesitation, she saw something raw in his eyes. Not fear, but the pain of betrayal. "Marco, my oldest ally, the one I trusted most." Lila's heart twisted. She had seen Marco, always calm, polite, loyal. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet could. "What will you do?" she asked. "What I always do," Adrian replied coldly. "End it." But beneath his calm tone, she could feel the storm brewing inside him. The man torn between vengeance and exhaustion. She stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. "You can't fight the whole world alone." He looked at her then, really looked, and something softened. "I'm not afraid of the world anymore," he said quietly. "I'm afraid of losing the only part of it that still feels real." Her throat tightened. She knew what he meant, and she knew, somehow, that tonight, something irreversible would happen. Hours later, the estate lights flickered. The guards were gone, or perhaps compromised. The storm outside howled like warning. Lila moved through the darkened hallway, clutching her heart. The silence was broken by a single gunshot, distant but close enough to steal her breath. She ran. She found Adrian in the atrium, standing amidst chaos. Two of his men were already down. Marco, tall, unshaken, stood opposite him, gun raised, betrayal etched into his smirk. "It should have ended that night," Marco sneered. "But you got lucky, you always do. You could have asked for anything." "Marco," Adrian said, voice steady. "Instead you chose this, because you forgot who you were." Marco spat. "You got weak. For her." Mila froze. Marco's gaze flicked toward her, and in that single second she understood. She was the weapon he intended to use. He fired. Time fractured. The sound split the air. Without thinking, Adrian moved, fast, instinctive, pulling her into his arms. The bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him backward. She screamed, catching him as he stumbled. "No, Adrian!" Blood soaked his white shirt, but his eyes, those relentless dark eyes, never left hers. He reached up, brushing a trembling hand across her face. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice breaking. "And don't move." The same words she had once said to him, now returned like a vow. Fury replaced fear in her veins. She turned toward Marco, But before she could move, Adrian's men stormed in, ending the standoff in a blur of chaos and shouting. Marco fell, but the sound of his body hitting the marble barely reached her ears. All she could hear was Adrian's ragged breathing. She pressed her hands against the wound, tears streaking her cheeks. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered. "Not like this." He caught her wrist weakly. "Lila, you were never meant to be part of this world." "Then make me part of yours," she said fiercely. "Because I'm not leaving you in it alone." His eyes glimmered with something between pain and love. A look that spoke more than any confession could. Sirens wailed in the distance. His men moved to call for help, but Adrian raised a hand, his authority unshaken even in agony. No hospitals, no police, just her. She stayed with him all night, bandaging the wound, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, when the world was quiet, he whispered words she would never forget. "You were the first person who didn't fear me, the first who saw me. I built an empire of silence, and you broke it with a whisper." Lila pressed her forehead to his, tears falling onto his cheek. "Then I'll never stop whispering." A week's passed. The empire held, but changed. The fear that once ruled his men was replaced with something new: loyalty. Adrian's recovery was slow, but his fire returned, sharper than before. And Lila, she became more than the woman who saved him. She became his anchor, his reason to choose peace over power. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he found her standing on the balcony, lost in thought. The wind tugged at her hair, the same way it had the night they first met. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. His voice was a whisper against her ear. "Do you regret saving me that night?" She smiled faintly, leaning into him. "If I hadn't, I'd still be serving coffee to strangers. Now I'm serving destiny." He turned her gently, his gaze soft but burning. "Then stay with me," he said. "Not because you owe me, but because I don't know how to live without you anymore." Her reply was simple, a whisper, just like the one that started it all. "Stay quiet and don't move." And for once, the Mafia boss obeyed. As the city lights flickered below and the stars rose above them, the empire of blood found its balance, in the hands of a man who had once ruled the night, and the woman who taught him how to love in the silence between gunfire and breath. In the end, love didn't arrive in candlelight or poetry. It came in the form of chaos, in gunfire, whispers, and the unspoken bond between two broken souls who found each other in the ruins of trust. Lila Maren, the quiet waitress who once served coffee and disappeared into the background, became the heartbeat of a man who ruled empires with silence. And Adrian Moretti, the untouchable Mafia boss who had lived behind walls of power and fear, found his redemption in her eyes. A redemption that no priest or promise could ever offer. Their story was not about perfection. It was about loyalty in danger, tenderness in darkness, and love born from defiance. Lila never returned to her old life, because the woman who saved him that night was no longer the same. And Adrian, the man who had once commanded hundreds, learned that true strength wasn't in control, but in surrendering his heart to the only person who saw him as human. Together, they built something neither the Mafia nor the world could understand. A love that didn't need words, only trust. He once ruled with fear. Now he ruled with purpose, and beside him stood the woman who taught him the power of stillness, silence, and soul. On quiet nights, when the world outside burned with greed and noise, Lila would rest her head against his shoulder, and he would whisper the words that began everything. Words that once saved his life and now defined their love. "Stay quiet, and don't move." Because in that stillness, in that breath between danger and peace, their hearts finally found home.